What's up, guys? Welcome back. Thanks for checking out this episode. Today, I have Pat Barber. If you don't know who Pat Barber is, uh, former CrossFit Games athlete, CrossFit seminar staff, currently runs Warm Up and Workout, which is a CrossFit programming uh, option. And essentially, Pat has he's turned this like fitness enthusiasm to become a career and become an entrepreneur. So I'm super excited to chat with Pat and figure out like how did he get to this and talk about how he wants to be a fighter and what he's doing next.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. So thank you, Pat. Thanks for hopping on.
Yeah, stoked to be here, man. Happy to chat.
So I would like to kick off because I have a surprising number of people that listen to this that may not know who you are,
Yeah.
including my grandma.
Hey, Graham.
So so if you would will you go all the way back and tell us like how did you find CrossFit?
Sure.
We'll start with that.
Sure. Yeah. I do not expect anyone to know who I am. I appreciate the commentary. Like surprising, people might not know, but I do. I'll go ahead and tell my story. I started CrossFit in 2004. My old high school teachers were actually my middle school pottery teacher was Nicole Carroll, who's the director of training for CrossFit, and then uh,
No.
yeah, and then Tony Budding, who is the original media director of all of CrossFit, he was my English teacher, my writing teacher. So those two brought CrossFit to my high school, and from there I was
And
like,
just for anybody who doesn't know, those two helped bring CrossFit to the world.
yeah, yeah. The Tony was the first person to start making videos and putting CrossFit content in picture and video format onto the website, and he kind of saw the potential for it. Nicole was just kind of this, badass, stoic individual with amazing presentation abilities. Who now is currently kind of the person who is the liaison for all of the relationships that CrossFit has in a public space. So she's a big deal. Um,
Yeah, that's what I wanted to highlight. If you don't know, like you just like knocked two bombs out of the park. So I know people weren't going to catch those two names.
yeah,
But that's cool that you those are your teachers. So
those
sorry, go
were
ahead.
my yeah. So those are my high school teachers. Nicole, my middle school teacher, and Tony, my high school teacher. And they brought CrossFit up to Mount Madonna, which was my school. And I just started training in it, and I thought it was a fun little competition more than anything. I didn't like working out, but I loved competing, and it was this game every day that I got to play, and it was super fun. So I started that in 2004. I was 18, and I've been doing it ever since. I've gone from there into working for the company, filming and editing video, working on the back end website. I've sold gear for the company. I've worked for the games department. I've been in the games 7 times, individual as well as team. I've run many gyms. I've traveled the world. I teach seminars. Like I've kind of made my entire. I found my wife through CrossFit. I have four sons with my wife, and we were met at the CrossFit Games as competitors. Like I owe a lot to the experience that I've had from CrossFit. But yeah, that's been my life.
Have you done any other job besides something CrossFit related?
Yeah, I have. I have. I've worked in customer service, doing like room service and waiting tables, and I've worked for supermarkets, and I've done things outside the CrossFit direct space. But I found myself in the past 20, 15 years, 17 years ish, being pretty heavily invested into making my living doing CrossFit or something related to it, I should say.
Was Yeah, that's really cool. But there's definitely a benefit to like working those, for lack of a better term, like shitty jobs. Like a lot of people would describe them as like no knock, not I'm not knocking on anybody that's like a waitress or like working in supermarkets, but it's like everybody has that like shitty job in their mind that when they were in high school or through college and they're like, yeah, that was my 18-year-old shitty job.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think there's like a lot of like benefit and carryover to doing that, and I'm
Oh,
hoping that
absolutely.
my wife and I, my son's 13, and we were just talking about the other day. He was saying like, "Oh, when I'm, 15, I'm gonna try to go work at the grocery store around here."
Yeah.
And we're like, "Oh, cool." He, we want him to work a shitty job and know what
Yeah.
it's like to work a shitty job.
I think they're more like they're. I think a lot of our generation thinks that you can just start working a job that's carries with it weight, and in order for us to actually get to a place where we're doing a job that's truly meaningful and that we feel like satisfies our soul, I think a lot of the times we have to actually start. I mean, you do have to start somewhere, and you can't just jump into something that's that level. You won't have the capacity to do very basic things like follow structure and understand that there's things that you don't want to do that you have to do, and I think those jobs are essential for building just a basic understanding of, you know, a process of like this is where you start, and then you go to the next place. And I think some people try to get that through school, but I think it's more applicable to life to do that in a waiting tables setting. Plus, you get to deal with people in their best and their worst. Like I find myself using the same tactics as a busboy that I do as a that I do now as a high level coach and developer. It's the same thing. It's just on a different scale and in a different relationship.
I have members ask me, they recurrent ask me, they're like, "I don't know how you do it," or "How could you, how can you deal with this big class?" or "How can you go deal with like so and so?" And I tell, I was like, "Man, I used to be a high school math teacher."
Yeah.
And so I tell, my adults, I was like, "Listen, there's no number of adults that you could squeeze in this building that is going to compare to 25 freshmen.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. It's a great point.
Like, you guys are easy. No problem. 100 adults squeezed in here. I got it. We're going to run
Easy.
this like a circus. Like 25 freshmen, I'm out. I'm good." So hats off to the teachers who are still doing it.
Hell yeah, man. I've been in the mindset that if I had my way, like I had all the funds in the world, I would make teaching this most exclusive, super high paying. It's like you're kicked out if you're bad, like right away, and it's like just this elite of elite jobs. It should be like doctors, where like people are like, damn, you're a doctor or you're a lawyer, like, and they just get paid buku dinero and they are held to really really high standards. I think that would be the ideal for our world, but I just don't see it. It's like the opposite as it currently exists, and it's hard to watch, but that's where we're
Yeah, and
at.
the irony is like it's the opposite, and they use that. It's like because they don't get the funding or the support,
Hmm.
you end up not getting as high level teachers, and then
Totally.
those, even the good teachers, don't get the support that they need,
Yeah.
and then the whole world, the country is like, "Well, you're doing a crappy job." I was like, "What?" Like,
What do you expect,
like what
man?
do you? Yeah, like what do you
It's like
mean?
I'm gonna burn out soon, even if I'm doing a good job initially.
Yeah, like you just pick any random adult and tell them like, "Hey, I want you to entertain these, ninth graders, 25 ninth graders for an hour."
Yeah.
And not only do I want you to entertain them, I want you to like by the end they should be able to do something productive.
Right. And you're like, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So did you consciously, was it a conscious effort to make CrossFit a career, or did it just like organically unfold?
No, it for me it really organically unfolded. I'm not a how do I say this? I'm not a particularly ambitious person when it comes to my own personal success. I know a lot of
Okay.
people who are very hard workers and they like put their head down. They're like, this is what I want. And they go get it and they set goals and they just grind and grind and grind. I'm like pretty satisfied no matter what I'm doing. As long as I can kind of eat food I want to eat and like and hang out the way I want to hang out, like I'm pretty satisfied. So am pushing forward and continued growth is something that I have to work on intentionally. I have to be like, okay, I'm really comfortable right now. I should probably get uncomfortable, and I have to like pursue that. So like even in my career through being on CrossFit seminar staff, like you start as just a trainer, and then you teach lectures, and then you go into higher level lectures, and then you move into flow mastering, and then you can move into mentorship. That process was, I've been on staff since 2006, 2007, right around there, And I put most of the flow masters through their level one. And I was not a flow master yet because I didn't go, hey, I want to do this. I was just like really comfortable doing my other jobs, and I didn't feel the need to be in a leadership role. So I had to be like, okay, time to get uncomfortable. Let's drive. And I would put myself there. So that's been my growth as I age, as I mature, so to speak. I guess you could call it that. Is to pursue higher levels of success within a business or an organization. So I never set out to do that. It just kind of it all. I said yes to a lot of opportunities when they presented themselves. Like that's what I think I did a really good job of. Is someone would be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" I'd be like, "Yeah, let's do it." Um, but it was never an intentional design or creation that way. I was lucky in that regard.
Yeah. Um, a couple things. One, I'm always surprised, like you say that flippantly. You saying like, "Oh yeah, I said yes to a lot of things," but that's a big deal for a lot of people. Like it's
Yeah,
really hard for a lot of people to be like, "Yeah, let's try it out," because
yeah.
I find that a lot of people's default is just like, "Whoa, change. Nope, I'm good wherever wherever I'm at, even if this is a cool opportunity."
Yeah. And I think that's true. I think that's one of the reasons I've had the success that I've had is, I didn't have the ambition that a lot of people have, but I was very willing to just be like, sure, why not? Let's see what happens. Because it is scary for, I know, for anyone to like do change, but it's one of those things where I felt pretty confident that no matter what happened, I would have a way to work my way into another position, or whatever it is. Like I had that underlying sense of well-being as a person that no matter what went down, I could just be like, okay, we'll try something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's something to it. It's like, well, if this doesn't work out, I guess I could go get a different job.
Yeah. Well, I think that's hard for me. Is like I went to a very small school, and I grew up with a bunch of these kids who are brilliant. Like just every single one of them 4.0 GPA. Like I was the easily the least academically uh, well off in the class. I had like a 3.5, and I was a point lower than most people. And so it's like, and I say small. I graduated in a class of 10 kids, and all of those other
That
kids.
is small.
Yeah, they were it's a small college prep, and they were all brilliant individuals. And I still see a lot of them struggling to find their place. And it was almost like they had so many options, like of what they could do, that they failed to choose one. And then there's also a certain underlying thing that some of them don't have, where like they worry like if they make the wrong decision. Like for me, I walk my life back, and I'm like, if my entire life explodes, like I lose all my jobs and I can't earn any revenue, like I could always just be like, call up a friend and say, hey, can me and my family sleep on your couch for a month, and we need to figure out I need to go do some construction. Like if I work it far enough back, like my worst case scenario is not that bad. I know that's not the situation for everyone, but in reality, in the day and age that we're in, for most of us, anyone probably listening to this podcast who can actually sit down and on a device listen to a podcast, you probably, on a logical level, if you work it back far enough, it wouldn't be that bad. Like, well, you file bankruptcy, you live for 7 years without credit, and you work low end jobs to figure out a way to survive again. Like it's it's not that bad compared to other times in human history where you work it back far enough and you don't eat and you die. It's not, we're not there right now for a lot of us.
And I hear a lot of that from that sort of talk from immigrants.
Mhm.
When they come from different countries, and they'll say like, "No, like you don't realize how good you have it here."
Yeah.
And they'll like describe that situation. They're like, "We didn't have food. There were 8 of us in one bedroom. It was a dirt floor, and like
Yeah.
I clawed my way to get here, and like I'm stoked to be this big machine operator, running this crane that,
Totally.
other people are upset about."
Totally. And I think that it's really hard to put a lot of these things into perspective, because you only know your experience, right? So you're only comparing, like, comparison is not a good thing to do, period, for the most part. In
Yeah.
but like, a lot of the issues we have right now are in here. I think humans have been given an opportunity to go too internal, like, throughout lots of human history. Like, we had to be like, do we have food to eat? Do we have a place to sleep? And that was like consumed most of our cognitive space. But as we've become more wealthy, we can think about deeper and deeper things, and create maybe trauma where there is no trauma, or we can extrapolate and grow something that is, yes, it's bad, but in the grand scheme of things, if you were to compare it to the rest of human history, it's not that bad. But for you, it's the worst thing ever. And I think that's the hard part, is like, we can say these things, and an immigrant comes in with this crazy perspective, and we see that and we're like, you're right. But we still only know our experience. We still only know, like, I've had a pretty whatever life I've led. And so whatever is happening to me right now could be the very worst thing that's ever happened to me, even though that is like the best thing that's happened to the immigrant person, and you're like, huh. So it's hard to even make that comparison. I always go back to that quote from Man's Search for Meaning, the book by Viktor Frankl.
I've heard it. I have not read it.
So he basically wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He survived the Nazi internment camps, so he watched a lot of his family and friends just suffer and die. And so there's an interest, a very poignant perspective there, because he was a psychologist going into it. But he has a quote on suffering, saying suffering is, he used a very specific metaphor. He said suffering is like gas filling a chamber. If you put a bunch of gas in the chamber or very little gas in the chamber, it still fills the chamber equally. It's just,
Mm.
so he talks about that with suffering and trauma in the human soul. It's like, no matter what you have, it's going to fill that space equally, even if on a relative scale, one person's is, if you looked at them together, you're like, this person's is way worse objectively, and this person's is way less. It still fills you the same way. So I always try to have empathy when I think about people who are not doing very well. And then you look at their lives and you're like, you probably should be doing okay, because that's the worst they've ever had it, and that's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I work on that myself, the balance of, one, you mentioned, like, man, my worst case scenario is somebody's best case scenario.
Mhm.
So then that for me empowers me to take risk. Because it's like, if I take this risk, the worst case scenario is this person's best case scenario. I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, but then also, and using that to feel gratitude for where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so it's like this balance of, like, man, like, I know I have this sort of like safety net that I forget that exists because we live in the country that we live in.
Mhm.
I'm empowered because of what these other people do, and just like balancing those two of like, and balancing all of that with gratitude. And it's like this constant dance of like, I want to get better. I'm thankful for where I'm at. I can take these risks.
Yeah. Well, but I like what you said there, is like, I want to get better, but I'm also thankful for where I'm at, because I think people kind of take it as, they're like, just be thankful for where you're at, just be stagnant. And it's like, no, no, no. Like, like, you can still be better, and but that also doesn't have to completely overwhelm you. I think too many people get caught up on both ends of the spectrum, of either being like, you should be fine where you are, no change isn't necessary, or just constantly being like, I gotta be better. It's like those two ends of the spectrum. And I think very often right now we see people who are either side, versus like, there's a happy medium of like, I'm pretty satisfied, but I'm also going to take challenges and take these risks and do these things, because I want to be even
Yeah,
better.
it's not or, it's and.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
I think that that could be a good podcast name. It's not or, it's and it's like, it's maybe a balance based thing. I feel like far too often, especially in our health and wellness space, it's like, it's either this or this, and you're like, no, there's a big gray area.
Yeah, well, and that's cool because, like, I mean, that's a good tie into like what we do is, I'm an affiliate owner, and and what we do in CrossFit is like it's all and
Of course.
because you get people who are Olympic lifters, and they're like, it's this, it's only this, and then
Mhm.
you get people who are more boot camp hit style, and they're like, it's this. We're like,
Yeah.
it's both.
Yeah.
We're both.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's been one of the strengths of people who truly understand CrossFit is they're like, yeah, man, I totally see the value in what you're doing, but know it for what it is. Like, you don't go to a strength
Yeah.
person and say, yeah, you're getting more fit. You're like, no, 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 you're getting stronger, and that's cool, but you're not achieving more fitness. And you go to the boot camper, and they're like, this is the only way, and you're like, it's not the only way. And in fact, it's incredibly limited when it comes to
Hmm.
many, many things. Uh, but if you're having fun and you're living a better life because of it, power to you. So it's being that happy medium and always questioning and being like, is this giving us what we want? Has kind of been a strength of, uh, in my mind, a strength of the CrossFit space. If people who understand it, I think a lot of people know the name really well and they feel like they know it and they beat people over the head with that versus understanding the deeper methodology. And I know it's a kind of a throwaway, but it's like people are, you're doing it wrong. like, like, and there's many ways to do it right, but there's definitely ways to do it wrong in my mind.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Going all the way back to you had mentioned like, hey, you're not necessarily driven,
Mhm.
so you work on it. Where did that come from, and why did you decide like, oh, I need to work on being more driven?
Yeah. I think responsibility kind of brought that out in me. The when I was a single man, like, or dating, there's not much of a responsibility to my partner other than to just be loving and kind to them. But as I got married and had children and realized that there is a sense of responsibility to both earn money and be the example for this next generation, there needs to be some work in a way that is meaningful. And just being okay is a good example, but also striving for higher levels of success and being uncomfortable and working really hard are attributes that I want to show my sons. So it became less about me and more about me being more capable for my family. So I think responsibility played a huge role in my life to push me those directions. And then I realized that I was more capable than I thought in some ways, and then also less capable than I thought in others, which was a profound realization. Like, realizing that there's a lot I can do if I just try, and I'm also not as special as I thought I was in certain areas. So that was it's been great.
Do you have some examples of each that you're willing to share?
Sure. I think with regards to leadership, I have struggled a lot initially. And then as I pursued higher levels of leadership and roles within CrossFit that have people below you, I've found a great niche for myself in being somebody who is holds people to a high standard, but also gives them autonomy to kind of be themselves. And that's bit me in the butt sometimes, but I find that I've excelled in that space more than I would have expected. Um, and then where I've kind of had to learn that I'm not that special is like, I thought I was really good at, say, CrossFit or fitness or physicality. Like, what I've been gifted kind of naturally is physicality. Like, if what I find very fun, what comes easy to me is anything that's physical. So you tell me to go play a sport, you tell me to go learn something, I'm pretty quick to pick it up. But there's a lot of people who are very quick to pick things up. That's not that special. What truly would be special within that space is somebody who's like a Matt Frazier or like a Tia Claire
Yeah.
Toomey, who like is like truly great. And I'm not truly great. I'm good. Like but like how I positioned myself in my head was truly great. And so like when I didn't meet certain expectations, it was really confronting for me. But in reality, like if I step back and go like, you're not special, and that's okay. Like it's okay to not be truly special. Just be like good and competent, and can go apply that and still have a ton of fun at whatever physical thing that I do. Right now, my applications for my physicality are I play beach volleyball competitively, and I surf, and I suck at both those things relative to the other individuals who are out there, you know? So even though I'm like, I pick things up easy and I'm like, not terrible, I'm not great. And knowing that and owning that, I think is good. And it's been a hard thing for me to do in that realm. So those are kind of the two places that I had more capacity and I came to terms with my capacity in another.
That's interesting. And what you had alluded to is, even though I realize like this might not be my thing, I can keep doing this thing and enjoy it.
Yeah.
In relation to fitness. And I use myself as an example with my members all the time, because I've been doing CrossFit for 10 years. So usually when people come in, I'm at, towards the top of the leaderboard in our gym, and they're like, "Oh, like you're so fit." And I'm like, "Dude, compared to the people who do CrossFit, I am like nothing substantial by any means." Like, people who if you do CrossFit, like didn't go to the quarterfinals. So it's like, can I do muscle ups? Can I do handstand push ups? Like, yeah, I can do some cool party tricks, but it's like there's no delusions about that meaning something more than a party trick. And
Yeah.
but also like going back, I mean, tying it back to the other one too, is knowing that like anybody who does CrossFit, if you walk in the grocery store, you're probably the fittest person in that grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Like,
Right?
yeah,
It's both. It's both.
totally. Totally. It's definitely both. And I love that. I love kind of coming to the potential that I have, and having that. I think you end up, I think you end, or I end up being able to walk, like carry myself with a certain level of poise because of my understanding of myself, like, yeah, I might not be Tia Claire Toomey or Matt Frazier, but I, like you said, can walk into a grocery store and be the fittest person in this grocery store. And I don't know why that's even remotely important to me, but it's just like, I don't know. I think comparison, while I said earlier, it's just not something that is particularly healthy. It's also natural as a human. And I'm going through the process of trying to figure out how I can just continue to be able to do the things that I want to do in my life. And this, where I'm at, I'm like, dude, I can do everything I want. And then there's some things I want to be a little better at. So okay, I gotta focus my training a little bit more here, and spend some more time here. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's a constant back and forth, but I don't have the clearest of thoughts there.
No, that's cool. Um, so in the beginning, before we like hit record, you had told me that you wanted to or that you're pursuing being a firefighter.
Yeah.
Um, and up to this point, you said you've done like 17 years of CrossFit, everything, being a gym owner, being a coach, being on seminar staff, selling programming. Could you tell me more about about this, what you're pursuing, and
Yeah, I
why?
mean, I've for the last, since 2015, I've owned my own business, and I've also worked from within CrossFit and kind of been in this fitness space for a really long time. And I really do love everything that I've done, and I still want to continue to do it. I have this level of physicality, like I've spoken about, that I want to utilize for good. and and when I look at jobs where that's something I can do, firefighter is definitely one of them. It's a place that I can really apply myself with my physicality and my level to think under pressure, and my long term capacity, and be like, I can help people with this. In addition to that, there's challenges that it presents that I think I would be uniquely suited to do well in. which is like working on a team, which is eventually ending up in helping with leadership if possible, and being able, like I said, to think under pressure. Also, something in my life that I've had to learn is empathy. Like it's that's not something that came natural to me. So when I see someone hurting, I have to be like, "Ooh, they're hurting. I should figure something out there." Whereas I think a lot of people are naturally empathetic to where they actually like feel other people's pain and they take that on board. And I don't think that that's very healthy when it comes to being in a emergency service role. So when you're working as a firefighter, a lot of that is dealing with very broken people, whether they're sick or whether they've got an acute accident that just happened. So you're seeing kind of the worst of the worst situations. And if you're somebody who takes that on board constantly, um, that ends up being detrimental in the long run. And I think that, and I'm not sure, but I'm hoping that with my having to have learned empathy as an adult, I can not take on all that pain quite the same way. So I think it uniquely suits my skills. It also, on a practical level, it's a great career for you've got retirement in the long run. In the Bay Area where I live, they're the highest paid firefighters in the country. And it's just there's a lot of opportunity for me to tick off a lot of boxes in my mind, of things I've wanted in my life. So while simultaneously
It.
doing fitness and stuff.
Hey, if you made it this far into the episode, I just want to say thanks for checking it out. If you're digging it, then please leave me a 5-star review on Spotify and hit subscribe on YouTube. You already got the app open, so real quick, just make that happen. That will let me know that you're digging it and help me reach even more people. So I appreciate it, and let's get back to the episode. I want to unpack that a little bit. So I get a lot of friends and people that reach out. They're like, "Hey, I don't like what I'm doing, and I want to pursue something that's more in alignment with who I am."
Yeah.
And that's about as far as it goes. They're like, "I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do next. I don't know." But that's what I know is that statement. So with that context, how did you actually how did you come to the conclusion where you're like, oh man, firefighter checks all these boxes? Because it makes sense when you say it now, but it's
Yeah.
another thing to like even look and consider being a fighter fire.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a reality to our current world where you have to earn a certain amount of money to live. And depending on where you live, that's a higher or lower amount. And depending on the responsibilities you've accumulated throughout your life, that's a higher or lower amount. So I think the first step for anyone wanting to do anything is to look at what they truly need and be like, I do need to do something that earns this revenue. And it might be that you need to do something you don't want to do to earn that revenue for now while you work on something else. And that might be a longer, harder process for whatever you're going to do there. But I think that first step of being like, what do I truly need? Because in reality, you don't need that much, but we do place a lot of things like you buy random expensive cars and you go into debt and you do this crazy shit in your life and end up in a place where you've hamstrung your capacity to say yes to a non-financially beneficial endeavor that could eventually be financially beneficial. So um, when I looked at my life, like I've always kind of lived within my means, and then tried to, if I'm pursuing something else, like I make sure that there's the potential for it to do something for me out there. So I've never lived outside my capacity. I've also been raised in a way where I didn't need much money. Uh, that being said, I live in California. I have a 5-acre parcel. I have 4 children. We have 2 cars. I live in Santa Cruz, which is one of the median house price is like 1.4 million. So like there is a lot of money required to live my life, but it wasn't like I jumped into that. It was
Yeah.
like it was like you bite off one little piece more and one little piece more and one little piece more. So to bring it all back, I think that you need to recognize what is it you truly need, get rid of the stuff you don't actually need, and be like, okay, how can I earn the revenue to do this? And then try to earn that revenue. And once you're earning that revenue, look to see if there's a way you could do that doing something that you like or you love. and make and for me, that was, I did that initially through coaching. Like I started to we were I was just a coach. I was earning, whatever, 10-15 bucks a class. And then I built my class bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I started taking on one-on-one clients, and I was earning a decent amount of money coaching clients. It suited all my needs. I didn't have the capacity to buy a house then, but I could live as I wanted to live. I could. There's nothing I was doing that was making it so my coach's revenue was not enough. Um, and then I met my wife, and she owned her gym. So I kind of became a part of that, where I was like, I didn't own the gym, but my wife did. And I kind of helped her run that. So that's a next level up of like, okay, now you're leading this, and you can expand your revenue because you're in control of, who comes in and out of the gym. And there's still a ton of work associated there, but the potential for revenue is higher because you're not an hourly employee. So, and then it went from there into running multiple gyms and working for another company that did that, while looking at my time and being like, I can also teach seminars. So you're adding another little piece in there, to where eventually I was earning enough money to where it's like, yeah, I can put a down payment on a house. And it just kind of like snowballs thing to thing. And I think much like fitness, you look at the end state and people who are doing what you want to do, and you're like, I want to do that, and I got to do it right now. And it's like, probably not. What you
Yeah.
do is you got to be like, where are you currently at? What do you actually need? And let me live within that, and then push that boundary just slightly. If you try to make the big jump, you're either going to have to do something you hate, or maybe sell your soul doing it, or you're going to not be living in congruence with how much, like, what you're doing, maybe something that you love, and what you want, which is maybe something that's like more money or what it might be. Um, but in reality, for me, I was pretty satisfied with less. I just ended up with more because I could slowly afford it. And now you're sitting in my garage, and it's like a crazy nice garage gym. That being said, I didn't pay for any of this gear. I've slowly been I've been sponsored over the years and collected.
Well, I see you got a ton of jump ropes hanging on your ceiling.
Yeah, I've been sponsored by RPM for years, and part of their sponsorship was like 3 jump ropes per month that I could get. And I'm like, what do you use 3 jump ropes per month for? And I mean, they're like $80 jump ropes, and they're the best jump ropes in the business, and they have all these cool ones. So at one point in time, I was like, hey, I've been sponsored for like 5 years. Can I have like all those jump ropes? And they're like, sure. So now they all hang on my wall here.
That's hilarious. I've had the same jump rope for we're closing on 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not necessary for you to buy more and more and more. Just replace the cable, and you're good to go.
Yeah. But I'm finally getting to the point where I need to get new handles. Like they're just like the bearing inside's getting rusty. I'm like,
Get it,
ah.
get a new one. Break bank. I mean, these ones, we have like our own custom one. Like our family had a line that they put out through these guys, and they like, we've got, these guys are just awesome. They're the best ropes in the business, hands down. So that's why. I mean, I also work for them. They bought our company a little while ago. So, but that I used their jump ropes long before we ever did that.
That's cool. I I really I really appreciate the that what you described is consistent with what I've been telling people is like you basically what I tell people is like you have to start off in this like internship process. And we mentioned in the beginning, like you're not gonna you can't like go to school and get a degree and like pursuing your passion.
Totally.
Like, unless you're gonna be like a doctor or a lawyer, it's like, that's a little more straight path. But if you're like, "Hey, I wanna be a CrossFit coach," or "I wanna go
Yeah.
be," whatever, or "I wanna be an entrepreneur,"
Yeah.
like, there's no application and interview process for that.
Yeah.
And so, like, there's quite literally, like, years of, "I'm doing this for free because one, even though I like it, I probably stink at it, and I don't realize how much I stink at it. So it's like I got to get good at it. And so that
Yeah.
means I got to like it enough that I got to be patient to be good at it and do it for free until I become an expert. And
Yeah.
then once you become an expert, you're like, "Oh, cool, I can sell it." And you're like, maybe not, because you might not have any customers." So
Yeah.
you're like, now people need to know that you exist. And that's a whole nother process of like, just letting people know, like, hey, here's this thing that I do that I'm an expert in, and making sure that it's a problem that people solve. And like you said, people, and I've totally been guilty of this. Like, look at somebody where you're at, and you're like, cool, it's Tuesday. How do I end up there on Friday?
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, that's not how anything works. But I do hear what you're
Right.
saying. That's how the lotto works. And how many people succeed at that one?
Yeah, not a lot. And it is tough because I mean, there's also not without examples of people who, they happen to hit gold. Like you hear of like affiliate owners that like opened up the right spot, the right time, and they're like 3 months, they're like, we got 100 members. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
that's that'd be nice for me, but for 99% of us, like that's just not how it works. So it's like
Yeah.
sometimes you strike, and sometimes uh it's a grind, and I'm just gonna keep banking on the grind. And
Oh yeah. I mean, I've started. I mean, we started like our first company, which was Warm Up and Workout, which is the one that we've had the most success with. But we've started like 4 or 5 companies since, and all of them have failed. Like every single one that we've tried to start within the same space has been like launch dead, launch, and we know the space well. But it's a very saturated market when it comes to unique products and whatnot. So like you said, sometimes you put something out there, right place, right time. Other times, you have not the greatest product, so it's not going to work. Like there's a lot that has to go into it, depending on whatever market that you're in. So yeah, I think failure is a big part of it, and it's corny because every entrepreneur will say that it's like you got to fail, but it's like that's true. It's not. They don't say it all because they're like, yeah, I'm going to jump on the bandwagon and say you got to fail. It's like the people who succeed fail all the time. Like, and it's just a reality of they keep going. They keep doing another thing and doing another thing and doing another thing, or trying a different gym or doing whatever it is. Like they keep doing it, and they don't do the same shit over and over again. They change, ideally, if they want to succeed. And then yeah, and that's I don't know. I think that's just the nature of on a bigger level. That's the nature of what we do have to do as people. Is just kind of try again and again and again.
when it's like I tell new members at my gym, they're like, "Oh, I just did this CrossFit workout. That was horrible." And they're like, they're all like describing how it is, and I'm like, "Yes." I was like, "There's good news and bad news." It's like the bad news is it's not really going to get any easier.
Yeah, yeah,
The good news is you're going to get better at it.
yeah.
And they're like, "How does that make sense? How do I get better at this and it never gets easier?" And I'm like, "Well, you level up, you do the next hard thing, but it's the same thing with, with my own journey is like it doesn't make the failing suck any less. Like it
Totally.
still doesn't feel good. It's not like I'm like waking up in the morning like, hope this doesn't work today.
Yeah,
Like I hope it all works, but I just get better at like dealing with it and like moving on and pivoting. And like you said, I'm not just doing the same thing over and over again expecting a different result.
right, right.
That's cool. What uh how does this fit? You've alluded a little bit to wanting to be an inspiration like with your boys. How does this fit with your family dynamic? Do you and your wife like like this? Do you guys make moves like this uh to move the family unit?
Yeah, and for sure. And I think that when I said it earlier about like responsibility being one of the things that drove progress for me, um, I could have just said my wife. Like she's the one who's like truly almost ambitious for me. She's the one who's like, hey, let's try this, and I go, sure. It's like I say yes to the things that she's like, let's do. So surrounding myself with someone who is just as competent and willing as she is, has been a life changer for me. I don't understand. I would be nowhere without her. So, and in addition to that, she's the mother of my 4 boys. So it's like, no, I would literally have nothing without her. I mean, it's so that those things, every decision I make has to be within the vein of how does this fit my family, and I think that that is amazing for a person like me, or I think for anyone. I think that before you have a family, and a wife or a partner is one thing, but kids are another. Like, kids are truly dependent. Like, if you work it back to the core, when you have a wife or a husband, like, on a deep level, you know that they could go off and do their own shit. Like, they could, like, if you separate, like, even if you don't think that that's the case, or maybe they're a type of person, they could go off and they're a fully grown individual, no matter how much you think that they rely on you. Children are not that. Children are 100% dependent upon you for everything up until a certain point, and they lose dependency as they age. But like, that grows you up faster than I think anything. And I think it makes life significantly more meaningful. And I'm not saying everyone needs to have kids. I think there's plenty of people who maybe shouldn't have kids, but I have never done something as important, nor as difficult, nor as meaningful as becoming a father. And so that's been amazing for me, and not remotely without its challenges. Like, I didn't sleep last night. Like, that was at all. Like, I have a 4-month-old boy, and I like was in and out of his room 4 or 5 times for 45 minutes to an hour at a time, just going, holding his little hand while he's crying. It's like, that sucks. And I hate doing that in the moment. But
Yeah.
the larger picture is I am a significantly better human because of the relationships I can have with my children.
I just experienced that this morning. My son's 13, and we uh we were like leaving the house to take him to school, and I was like in the middle of doing something, and they came in, and like I knew when we had to leave, but he like barged in the office. I'm like in the middle of working, and he's like, a couple minutes early, and he's like making a ruckus, and I was like trying to get this done before whatever this thing I was working on before we had to go. So then I was annoyed because I'm like, I know when we had to leave, like you're cutting me off early. And then, I realized as we were driving to the school, like, man, like, am I going to get upset about this thing that, like, isn't going to matter in 5 hours, nonetheless, 5 years?
Yeah.
Or am I going to be like, no, you're fine? And just enjoy, like, that my wife and I get to drive my son to school at 10:30 in the morning when other people are like needing somebody else to do that for them. I'm like, I'm so happy that I'm able to do this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard because it's really easy to also just sit in it and go, damn it, man, I got to do my work. Like, I have to get this done. And you just came in here and you interrupted that. Like, I totally understand being like, what the hell, man? But then reflecting on it and going, okay, show the gratitude. Where's the gratitude? It's here somewhere. But I think even to be able to do that, you have to have some clarity mentally. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I think that we have so much opportunity in this space that we're all in. Anybody listening to this podcast, but I think it's at the same time, many of us are so hamstrung by that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. And so I didn't I didn't explain this to you before you hopped on the podcast, but part of what I do with this is I promote mindset coaching. And
Hmm.
so what I'm doing is I'm connecting with people who have they've already been working in the gym, they've already been doing working on their nutrition, and they
Hmm.
realize like, oh man, this made my life better, and to an extent made me happier. But
Hmm.
now I realize like, no, there's no amount of workouts or vegetables or protein that I could eat that's going to now move the happiness needle any more forward. And I've like exhausted that resource. And so I need to know like, what do I need to do next to feel happy, feel fulfilled, be present.
Yeah.
And so I'm helping people get clear on who they are and what they value.
Awesome.
So then that can help them make decisions. So when you're in that moment, and when you have that clarity of like, yeah, my family, spending time with my family means more to me than anything else. Well, then
Hmm.
it's a no, then you can redirect to be like, okay, I can let this go. I can do this later,
Yeah.
to be present right now. But if I don't have that clarity, and if I haven't established who I am with those values, then I'm just going to continue to get frustrated with my kid, and I'm going to get, frustrated because I'm not getting this work done, and
Yeah.
wondering why I'm out of alignment.
Yeah. I mean, I think coaches and mentors are essential, and I don't think we have enough of those. I don't think we have a. I think those were kind of naturally built into internships and progressions and uh, parenting as it used to be. But I think far too often these days, kids don't get enough of that. They don't get enough of the hands-on. And it doesn't even be necessarily super focused, but like a good example of a well-rounded person. Um, that they get to live through, and then mentors throughout your life that represent different components of success. But I think as an adult, I think one of the best things that we can absolutely do is put ourselves in a situation where there's a bunch of people who are making positive life change. A CrossFit gym is a perfect example of that. It might not even be that they know it, but they've overcome such a huge hurdle just stepping through the doors. So you have a bunch of people who think they're just working out to maybe lose some weight, but they're positioning themselves around a bunch of other people who are doing hard shit on a daily basis intentionally, knowing that it's never going to get better. And then they make better food choices, which literally affect them on a molecular level, allowing them to make better choices with regards to everything else that happens. And then getting a coach who listens to them, throughout class and blah, blah, blah. And then if they want to take it a step further, go mindset coaching, for sure. But I think it's this, those types of things as adults, are putting ourselves in those scenarios, are some of the most valuable things that we can do. Surrounding ourselves with people who are looking to make positive change, and then getting a coach too. I think it's really, really great. And so I applaud you doing it.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I have this like uh theory based on just like, I don't know, things that I've learned and things that I've seen, that when people initially join, let's say, a CrossFit gym, everything is just so out of whack that, like, when they join, um it teaches them that hard work and that grit and that structure, that they then can use, and that, like, that time structure. So then when they do that, they get enough clarity to realize that there's other things that are wrong,
Mm.
particularly mindset. But it's like before that, everything else, like, there was just so much chaos that it's like I'm spending more time figuring out, like, what I'm gonna eat when I'm hungry. How am I possibly ever gonna think about my thinking? Like, I'm just trying to live right now. And on top of that, I feel like shit because I don't work out. I have no energy. And so then when I teach myself this discipline, I create this sort of like schedule around this habit, and I align my basically my habits and my lifestyle in order. Now I'm no longer having to worry about these lower level things, and I can actually experience metacognition, think about my thinking.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and what's interesting to me is to examine, what is the first step? What is the thing? And I think it's totally different from person to person.
Yeah.
That's why I love the CrossFit gym, is because if they step in that space, there's many avenues they can head down. They can go the interpersonal relationship route with the coach and the people that are around. They can go down the nutrition route. They can go down the facing difficult things every day route. They can go down the learning to scale and being like, oh, I gotta drop my ego. Like, there's so many components that you can access that eventually get them to make long-term better decisions. But when I examine my own well-being, that's been a journey for me, is like, okay, which thing, if I affect it, will affect the other things? And, not applying that to other people, but just for myself. Because I know, you talk about data around people who work out and lose weight, and people who diet, and it's like the number one thing that causes somebody to lose weight is not working out, it's dieting. But the number one thing that causes people to stick to dieting is working out. So it's like, wait a second, these things work together. So, but there's some people that can just go hard in the paint on eating differently, and there's some people who can just go hard in the paint and training really hard. But like, when you couple the two together, you have the most success. And you're like, okay, So which one do I do first with this person? Do I address their foods? Do they have better energy levels? Do I throw them in the gym? Um, and I think that there's this conversation to be had in all those regards. But when I examine my life, if I want to have a better time of things, then it's not what I eat, although that's really important. It's not whether I'm working out or not, although when I do that, I feel so much better. In fact, volume for me, the more I do, the better I feel, which is weird. I don't think everyone's like that. I think some people respond poorly to that. Um, but sleep. So for me, if I'm sleeping well, everything else is better. And everything, like I can train more. I'm more likely to eat better. I'm more likely to do everything. And it's been one of those things where like if I don't sleep well, I have a much more difficult time making a good decision when it comes to food, making a good decision when it comes to, heck, should I train today? Should I step back on this bike here and lift some weights? Should I make a video? Should I work hard? Should I focus on this thing? My brain doesn't work if I don't get sleep, which is ironic because I don't sleep right now because I don't have a child. I have a child. And so it's like, I don't know. It's interesting to examine what truly impacts people. And I know people who sleep not at all and make all the best decisions. And I'm like, wow, good for you. Not
No,
me.
if I sleep, yeah, I need to 9 hours is optimal. I can still do good on 8. If it's sub 7, I'm not functioning.
Well,
I don't know I don't know how I would do anything.
that's me. Uh, that is where I'm at. And I am well sub 7. Just throwing it out there. I'm
But
an
you know, but
I'm an interrupted sub 7. Sub 7 total, multiple interruptions.
oh my god. Yeah, I am glad we're as much as I miss, like I look back and like miss different stages, of where my son's at, but I'm also grateful that it's like I miss it. I don't need to go back. I could we could we can reminisce. But going back to what you were saying with people like, hey, do I work on nutrition? Do I work on fitness? And I always go back to like, what are you? Yeah, I ask my members like, basically, what are you willing to work on? And
Right.
it's like whatever you're willing to work on is going to move the needle forward, and then we can see how that affects the other things.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like that compounding will matter more than whatever I could tell you to do.
Yeah.
And the same thing applies. I think the same thing applies to getting your life in alignment. Like,
Yeah.
what are you willing to do? Are you willing to quit your job? Are you willing to try something new? Are you willing to do mindset work? Are you willing to, like, there's a never ending list, but it's like, what sounds exciting? You're like, yeah, I would try that out. It's like, cool, we'll do that and then keep doing that till it compounds. And maybe that'll lead to you doing something a little bit different later, just like working out leads to nutrition or leads to
Totally.
sleep or leads to water or whatever. But
Totally.
just like figuring out what you're willing and able to commit to.
Yeah. Well, and I also would just offer with all of that, I think that is a huge component. What you just said is like, what are you willing to do? And then do that. But I think that coupled with that is take ownership over the success and or failure of whatever happens. Because far too often I see people who are like, I'm willing to do this. And they're like, oh, but this happened. And then this happened. And then this happened. It wasn't my fault. Da, 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 da. It's like, just regardless of whose fault it is, just own it. Like I wasn't able to stick to that, or I wasn't, and like say you weren't, and nothing affected that. You just couldn't, and that's okay. And then move on to something else. And I think that ownership over it is far more empowering than than one may think. Even stuff that is out of your control, like owning the daylights out of it and just being like, well, next time I'll do this, whatever it is. I think that puts it into the place of like you're in power over the scenario versus just being like, well, this happened, because shit's always going to happen. Like you're going to want, like you're going to have a baby and you can't sleep. And I'm like, well, I can't sleep, but I'm going to own the situation. I had that baby. I'm going to be here. I'm not going to resent it. This is me. This is mine. I think that
I
that's
love that.
a better place to work from than like, well, but I went to a birthday party and I couldn't say no. Well, you could say no. You chose not to, and that's okay. But you chose it. Own it,
Yeah, I
please.
one of yeah, what am I don't remember exactly what it was. But they said, I can't do that. And I was like, it sounds like a won't. And
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, it's a won't. I'm like, yeah, it is a won't. And it's like,
Yeah.
if you don't, that's fine. But
That's
just
totally
acknowledge,
fine.
like, yeah, I chose not to do it. It wasn't a can't. You
Yeah.
decided not to do that, or what, or you
Totally.
decided to do that.
Totally. And I think that that's great. Nope, not going to do it. Why? Don't want to. Okay, great. Like that is a much more than, well, but I think, and then just own it.
Yeah, that's cool. And I, even with kids, that applies to all relationships. Like, you have no control over like what other people do, but you can control your posture and how you approach situations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Anything else that you want to share, or if anybody wants to like reach out to you, where they could find you?
They can find me on my Instagram account at Coach Pat Barber. You can find me at stayvirtuous.com. I have like a little gear shop where my little motto is "Stay virtuous." It's a saying within our community, and so I made some cool clothes and stuff through that. But other than that, that's about it. If you need to reach out
Oh,
to
and you
me,
got your
then
YouTube channel. You got your new. Isn't that newer?
I do. I have a YouTube channel. So if you go to my YouTube channel, what is my YouTube channel name? I think it's just Pat Barber. Pat Barber. I'm looking up my own YouTube channel right now. Yeah, it's just Pat Barber. There it is. I am working very hard to get 5,000 subscribers. I'm at 2.4. I got this.
Are you like, is that like for real goal that you're trying to get, or are you just like putting these
Yeah.
out, see what happens?
Yeah. No, I'd love to get 5,000 subscribers and then kind of keep pushing forward from there. But I think for me, the fitness industry is a pretty vapid and shallow industry, and I get really mad at it a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
I could either just sit and complain, or I could put out content that I want to see. And that's kind of the realm that I've headed in, is like, you could stop complaining and just put out content that you want to see.
Dude, I love that because that was literally like obviously I'm promoting the mindset coaching too, but really these conversations are conversations I want to see,
Yep.
because we see a lot of these people who, whether they're CrossFit Games athletes or they're celebrities like The Rock, and you look at them and you're like, oh, that's really cool, and like we said in the beginning, like, okay, I want to do that. Now what? And everybody talks about, like, a lot of people will share their origin story. They're like, oh, I graduated with 10 kids, and and the next thing you know, I own my own business. I'm on seminar staff. I live in California. I got this cool garage. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. What was all the crappy stuff in the middle that nobody nobody talks about?
Yeah.
And so these are conversations that that I want to hear, is like, what were things that you went, that you went through.
Yeah.
So that's cool that you also said that, because because I don't see this, particularly in the CrossFit space. I don't hear anything really like this. You'll hear bits and pieces here and there of somebody like telling their story, but I can't think of a podcast where it's like, yeah, if I want to hear people's stories, this is the podcast that I go to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right now, some of the bigger podcasts in our space are just hype. And I'm just like, gosh, darn it. Why? I don't care. Like, I don't care at all. But I do hear you.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out this episode. If you didn't already, like, subscribe on the YouTube channel. That lets me know you're digging it. But even more importantly, let me know what your big takeaway was. If you made it this far, that means you got something out of it. So send me a DM or drop in the comments what your big takeaway was. And if your big takeaway was you're ready to be an action taker, you're ready to lean into your passion and unveil what living authentically to you, living authentically to what God has aligned for you, then book a one-on-one discovery call with me to where we can figure out and unveil what those obstacles are preventing you from living that life, and provide some direction, some space, and some clarity to moving your life in that direction. So if that sounds like you, click the link in the show notes to book that discovery call so that we can connect. And until next time, thanks for listening.